What is up, Scrub fam? I am back after a really long time from not doing videos, and I'm here with a deck profile video today. We have Destroyer Kings coming out very soon. It's a really hot, fresh set. It has tons of things for you to be able to play as we move forward, into this weird, wonky card game that we all adore, which is the Dragon Ball Super card game. And so today I want to dive into one of my favorite decks so far from testing. I've had a decent amount of time to spend playing with this deck, testing with friends, Zap, Jose, really kind of vetting this out and getting the final card choices down and then coming up with the reasonings for the things that I wanted to be able to do. And so this is Mono Red Prison, or it's Frieza, again, another Magic reference. So the reason why I call it that is because of the way the deck operates. So the deck is basically probably one of the truest, most harsh control decks in the game right now because of the way that it functions. It basically focuses on the use of extra cards, and the extra cards that were printed in this set were absolutely absurd. Transcendent Strike is exactly what every mid-range or control player has wanted in the game. It's basically just a one costing, kills anything 20k or less, which is exactly what you need in this day and age to be able to stay efficient, because playing actual removal with battle cards is very difficult because the investment you have to spend, whereas now you just spend one energy and you can kill 70, 80, 90% of all the cards in the game. So a very powerful card there. And then of course the Frieza Leader, which was introduced, it's interesting because you're not allowed to play battle cards that cost less than 4. So you can't play anything that's 3 or less. So you actually can't play super combos. So you have to figure out ways to get around that and ways to actually make that something that's actually not a weakness, which, there's a lot of interactions that allow for that. And, the kind of the key card in the deck that kind of gives this the prison feel is Live to Fight Another Day. Because the way Live to Fight Another Day works is once you play this card, you course cantrips, you'll draw a card, and then your opponent can't play anything that has power 20k or less. If they do, they are discarding 3 cards, and that's for the duration of their entire turn. So they can't play multiple 1-drops. They can't play multiple cards that have 20k or less power, because if they do, they're going to be discarding 3 cards from their hand in order to make that happen. So Live to Fight Another Day is probably one of the most, if not the most important card in the deck, and that's something to just remember, is that if you're going to be playing this deck, if you're not playing it against an objection-based deck, then going second is often better, because your opponent is going to be, they'll take their turn 3, whatever, they'll do their thing, because the way Live to Fight Another Day works is it requires your opponent to have 3 energy. So they'll have 3 energy, they pass to you, you then charge to 3, you'll tap out for Live to Fight Another Day, because at that point, your opponent can't make any plays for 4 energy or less without discarding 3 cards from their hand. So oftentimes it's going to end up time walking the opponent. So what you'll notice a lot in this deck is when you're playing against somebody, they're going to pass a lot, which is exactly what this deck wants because of the way this deck functions. It's all late game driven, just based on, as you can see, the construction of the deck, and just inherently the leader can only play cards that cost 4 or more. So you have to stall out the early turns where you can start playing your late game bombs and disruption cards like Foreseeing Hit, Final Showdown Frieza, Berry Blue. All these cards work together really well to get to the point where your opponent is really not able to do much. So one thing to note about this leader is the way the leader functions is that on the front side, it basically has an activate main, look at the top 5, and then you search for an extra card, you put it in your hand. And then on Awaken, it's a draw 2 leader. So when you awaken, you want to make sure you get the most out of it. So you want to activate main on the front side, you get the extra card in your hand, you'll then awaken the draw 2, and then you'll use the activate main on your awaken side and then draw another card. So then now you've drawn 4 cards, which is pretty absurd. I mean, my hand size last night, even when testing, was up to 15 cards at some point, just because the amount of cards that you draw. And that's another reason why I really like sticking with Mono Red and really leaning into the Red Frieza's Army cards, is because of New Model Scouter. I wanted to be able to increase my odds of making New Model Scouter a draw 2, and especially in the early turns, this is a card that you want to kind of help find your engine pieces. And also, if you read the card, it actually helps find your secret rare, because New Model Scouter actually just searches Red Frieza Army and doesn't have a cost restriction on it, so you can actually find your secret rare with this card. So it's pretty impactful. So I really enjoy it. Key interaction for the deck, Loyal Kokono. If you haven't read this card or tried out this card is absolutely amazing into everything that this deck wants, because this deck has to play incredibly defensively, and of course it has some like offensive applications too, to kind of set yourself up for the next turn, or if you ever want to push for some reason. But basically the way the card reads is when you combo with this card, so 1 plus 10k, you search your discard pile for a extra card and you put it in your hand. So, and it's an auto that resolves when it's comboed. So it's a pretty big deal, because if you're ever defending against an opponent's attack and say they go to 30k and you're awakened, you'll then Kokono go to 25, then you can fetch a Kaba's Awakening from the discard pile, and then combo that as well, and then now you're over it, right? So the card itself just enables a lot of really strong turns and really strong defensive plays, which is why I love the card so much. And it's kind of makes not having super combos not a big deal, because this deck actually isn't really going to use its energy offensively too often until it's getting to a spot where it's not having to tap out, or it can tap out safely. So that's something to really remember. And that's, again, stressing why I want to play mono red as opposed to other colors, is I really want to be able to maximize the amount of red Frieza army cards I have because of Frieza's Awaken side. Because basically you get a negate every single turn with the Awaken side. So you just continue to stall and drag the game out. And that's a negate that your opponent can't interact with. So they can't do anything about it, which is pretty huge. So next, if we just go ahead and take a look at our extra cards, we have 4 Kaba's Awakening, 3 New Model Scouter, 4 Transcendent Strike, 4 After Image, 3 Is That All You've Got, and 4 Live to Fight Another Day. Is That All You've Got is a really good negate for multiple reasons. Number one is, of course, yeah, you can give 2 of your opponent's battle cards minus 15k for the cost of discarding a card, but the silently good part about this card is that since you have to discard another card, you can choose to discard an extra card to help get your extra card count in your drop area high enough for your late game bombs, which we'll go over momentarily. But at that, in general, is that all you've got is another version of a time walk, especially if your opponent has battle cards that are 25 or 15k or 20k, and if you just negate one of those attacks and you just choose 2 of their battle cards, get minus 15k, those cards basically can't profitably attack anymore. So, especially when you're awakened. So that card is just, it's absurd. It's exactly everything you want in the deck. 4 After Image Technique, it's our sparking negate. It's just, the card just continues to get better over time. There's no reason not to play this card at 4. 4 Transcendent Strike, because I really want it. I want to see it, especially in the Shenron matchup, because you need to be able to kill the Figure of Majesty on time. Transcendent Strike does that for you. 4 Kaba's Awakening, of course, because I talked about the combo with Kokono, and just in general, helps you fill your drop area. Thanks, Richard Zapp, for this. And then now we'll just go into the regular card suite. So 4 Kokono, I already talked about it. 4 Unbreakable, because we don't have super combos. 4 Foreseeing Hit, because it's still one of, if not the best red battle card in the game. And it's the perfect disruption card, because again, this deck is all about time walking the opponent. You want to make them have to pass as many times as possible, and Foreseeing Hit lets you do that. Foreseeing Hit lets you see their hand, take their best play, and then, at that point, they're not going to have time, right? They're not going to have time anymore. They're not going to have the play that they wanted. They're going to lose another turn, and as this deck gets to turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, this deck has a really hard time losing. A really hard time. And the card is perfect because, as we talk about, you have the Boogeymans in the format, like Height of Mastery and, Shenron Gogeta, and you need Foreseeing Hit to be able to take those pieces. It's something as we start to construct a sideboard as we move forward, minus Killy Zone becomes incredibly important in this format because of all the different counterplay cards and all those things, because Broly's so prevalent that you're going to start needing minus Killy Zone in almost every deck, so I could see that happening in this deck relatively soon. 4 Final Showdown Frieza, this is just basically giving us access to a Bloodlust, and it's just a fantastic attacker when you're trying to close out the game. 25k Double Strike Crit, and then of course it has the Bloodlust effect. 4 Berry Blue, the Negotiator. This card has been a huge overperformer. I think that, you look at a 5 energy, 19k body isn't much, but when you're stealing anything that your opponent has that's 25k or less and it ignores barrier, there's a lot that you can do with this card. There's a lot of things that you can steal that your opponent wasn't expecting you to be able to, and then once you do that, you're now, again, you're shifting to the fact that they're going to have to then invest energy on the turn to play another threat, and then that you get to, of course, have your defensive cards up, and then you don't have to worry about it, right? Because now you're taking away another attacker that they could have. 4 Frieza the Finisher. When this card comes down, it KOs anything that's going to be 25k or less. So, and that includes both your and your opponent's battle cards. That's kind of a big deal. Both your and your opponent's battle cards will end up getting KO'd when this card comes in, except for Frieza the Finisher, of course. We have 1 Frieza Army Reborn. Frieza Army Reborn is very easy to get in this deck, very easy to activate, very easy to find. It's been absolutely absurd when it comes down, whether if it's for me tapping out for 8 or me tapping out for 5. More often than not, you're going to be able to close the game with this card when you get to play this card. You get to look at your opponent's hand and whatnot, take a card, discard it, all that jazz. And then, of course, the actual perfect, best control finisher in the game is Golden Frieza, the Indomitable Emperor. When this card comes down, basically what it says is you and your opponent can't play anything that has 30k or less power. If either of you do, you have to take the top 4 cards in your life and place them in your drop area. So, your opponent basically now cannot play any battle cards. If they do, they're going to have to take 4 life. put it in the drop area, which is most of the time is going to end up being game over. So that means if they have to play a card to try and kill this, they're going to have to put cards into the drop area. You know, there's just not really many ways to interact with this card. And so this card, when it comes down, is really going to close out the game. And that's another thing to talk about with this deck is I don't start attacking until I'm winning the game. Like, I don't start attacking until I've pressed my advantage enough and I've basically run my opponent out of turns, gotten the game to a late game part where now that, you know, have an indomitable Frieza on the board, and then now the game is over because they can't do anything against you. They, you know, they no longer can, you know, play a battle card and continue, you know, pressuring you. There's just, it doesn't happen anymore. And so I don't start attacking until I know that I can win the game. So even if it's, for instance, like waiting until I have enough energy to play multiple foreseeing hits, or even if it's just, you know, getting a final showdown Frieza down on the board one turn and then the next turn casting like the 8-drop, or just, you know, you'll end up noticing with this deck that there's different combinations of things and cards that you can do to kind of piece your wins together. And you're not in a hurry when you're playing this deck at all. Like, your opponent has to beat you. Like, they have to beat you. And if they don't, you have inevitability, which is what makes this one of the first and best control decks that we've seen so far. It's one of my favorite decks to play at the moment. It's a ton of fun if you're a control player, or you really just like playing, like, you know, if you like a draw-go strategy, this is the perfect deck for you. You're really going to enjoy it. And I think you're really going to enjoy set 6 as a whole, because testing so far, the set has been very fun. There's lots of new interactions. It's very engaging. There's new things. There's new mechanics. And this deck is just one of them. And this is probably one of the most exciting things to see from the development team, because now you're starting to see how they can put these strategies together that they, you know, go a couple sets back. You probably didn't even think it was possible for them to be able to do it. And that's pretty absurd. So in general, this is Mono Red Prison with Frieza Leader. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile, and I thank you so much for all the support and everything that you've done for me. And if you want to check out the Patreon page, go check it out. I'll put a link down in the subscription. We have the new $10 tier, which is really popping off right now, which is basically you get to sign up for a monthly training camp, and you get to work with, you know, one of the members that works on 3XG Productions, which is Zap, Pat, Corbin, Danny Wynn, of course myself as well. And then when we have the availability, which we schedule it out monthly, so you can sign up for a monthly training camp, and then it's you and 3 other individuals are going to be basically almost like in a team. So you're almost like in a testing team with, of course, the person that's going to be assisting, and then you're kind of just going to work through everything. You're going to work through your decks, you're going to work through your plays, and all that is, it's really cool. We've had a lot of really positive feedback so far about the first one that we just had at the beginning of February, led by Danny Wynn, and of course we're getting better each time. And then we have another one coming up on the 12th, which I'm really excited about. You know, I'll be tuning in to see how that goes. But in general, thank you guys again so much for everything. The community is amazing. This game is the best game, and I love it to death. And again, thank you. Okay, bye.